Andrew Curry, Forestry Assistant 3.
Ricardo McAfee from Smallhold Bay Lodge.
Montenay Ferreira from Smallhold Bay Lodge.
And joining us, we have hello, Steiner. Yeah. Okay, you get to say an introduction. Good night, I'm Dr. Hannah from BAMSI. Thank you. And that's the introductions from those here and present.
Okay, so we will go down the list and have persons introduce themselves on the call. I see P. Smith, if you can introduce yourself. I think that's Mr. Prescott Smith. All right, we'll move on to Robert Young.
Howdy, I'm Robert Young. I'm a resident of Davis Creek out on Point, and I guess I also have been trying to help represent Smallhold Bay Lodge and the Smallhold Bay Foundation.
Thank you, Robert. We have Andrew. Can you introduce yourself? Oh, that's Andrew from Forestry. He's in the room. We have C. Lightborn. You can unmute and introduce yourself.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Cameron Lightburn with BAMSI here in Andros. Been part of the Mangrove workshop from March and just excited to continue the work that's going on. Thank you.
Great. We have Chantel Curtis.
Good evening, everyone. Chantal Curtis, Parks Planner, New Providence Parks Manager with the Bahamas National Trust.
Thank you, Chantel. We have Forestry Unit is here, of course. We have Gail Woon, Grand Bahama in the house.
Hi, this is Gail Woon from Grand Bahama. We're doing some mangrove restoration here, so I thought it'd be interesting to learn what you guys are doing, and maybe we can share ideas. And I run Earth Care. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. We have Latia Smith.
Hi, Latia Smith from Andros. Just a guest to see what's happening with the Davis Creek restoration. Thank you.
Thank you, Latia. LaRon Roll.
Good night. LaRon Roll here from the Bahamas National Trust on Andros.
Thank you, LaRon. We have Leslie Brace.
Oh, hello. Leslie Liz Brace here. BAMSI, Ministry of Tourism, Sustainable Tourism Department.
Thank you, Leslie. Someone as Samsung SMG. Oh, okay, never mind. He's in the house. We have Stephen Smith.
Good night, everybody. Stephen Smith, Bahamas National Trust, Andros.
Thank you, Stephen. We have Trevor Hanna. Trevor is my neighbor. He lives in Davis Creek, so I'll introduce him. And then we have Arnold Hamilton. And unmute isn't connected, so I'm not sure. And then we have Mr. Leary is online. So thank you all for coming, and we're so excited to have you all joining us virtually and in person for this meeting. We apologize for those in person. Our screen isn't, but an HDMI cord is on the way. So if you could put out the projector, and then we'll be able to broadcast it when they come. So we'll get started this is some of the events that are happening for this week. Hopefully, we're hoping that the weather cooperates. It doesn't look like it's cooperating, but we'll try to still move forward with it. So we'll start with some background on this consultancy, and the objectives of this consultancy is really to provide technical and operational expertise to implement the restoration and management plan of Davis Creek ecosystem with the forestry unit, And there are several components. It is part of a larger project, which is called the Bahamas Pine Islands Project. It's output 2.3 of that component. And it's designed, and the output is geared towards restoration of a mangrove system, about 50 hectares. We actually found that the area we're working in is actually closer to 85 hectares. So we're actually going to be impacting a larger area with this project. And so some of the activities in this project are to conduct a site assessment and determine the baseline analysis of the project, of the area. So finding out what is there and what the conditions are at the beginning of the project. And we'll talk about some of the difficulties with that, because we're kind of at the middle end of the project when we did this. So we didn't really get a true baseline for the project, but we still have something to know like what's out there. And then from that, we want to develop and implement a participatory-based site-specific management plan for the mangrove system, and making sure that it's community-based in monitoring and rehabilitating the mangrove area. And the community-based part is something that we're really going to stress, and that's why community town hall meetings like this are very important, to get the community's feedback and information for what we need to happen. And then research and monitoring programs to establish indicator species, and then just having a comprehensive monitoring program from that. This is the project area that you're looking at. Those who are in the room, if Wavell, you could hold up the map for them so they could see. It's on the screen for others. So this is the project area that we're looking at. It runs from the northwest from Love Hill Beach Road all the way down to Small Hope Bay Road. And so that's why you have persons here from Small Hope Bay Lodge, because they're technically in the area of the project area. And then you have Davis Creek settlement and Dream Villas and Brigadiers. And then I live right over there. That's in there. You have the beach, Love Hill Beach, which is very popular. That's where we're going to have the cleanup on Saturday, hopefully, weather permitting. That's where they hold the Crab Fest beach party and everything. It's a very popular beach, and that's the mouth of the Davis Creek. And so it's a very important area because everything that comes in and out of the creek system kind of comes from that area there. And so that's the area that we're looking at, and it's bounded by the ocean on the east, and on the west, it's bounded by the Queens Highway, which in essence kind of cuts through the mangroves. And so you could tell, and we'll talk about this a little later, before there was a road, there would be flowing water on the two sides. So now that you see with all this rain here, if you were to pass like tomorrow, you will see how much flooding there is on the other side of the road, because that water is no longer able to get into the wetlands as it used to be, because there's a road there now. So that's one of the biggest issues that is affecting this project area, is the roads. And you can see from the map, there are 4 roads in our project area that cut through the mangrove system. And each one of those roads in some way stop the flow of the water from where it should go and where it used to go before the roads were put in. And so you have some of the roads have culverts underneath them to allow some water flow. Some culverts are properly built. Most of them aren't. They're not well maintained, and so, or you don't have enough. And then some roads don't have any culverts, so you don't have any flow of the water through the wetlands like it used to have. And so that's really impacting the mangrove systems and the health of it. And so that's, in a nutshell, is the project area and kind of some of the issues that we're dealing with when we talk about rehabilitation of the mangroves. So for persons like Gail in Grand Bahama and other persons, our restoration project isn't necessarily like the ones in Grand Bahama and Abaco, which had their mangroves like decimated from the hurricane, right? They had like almost 85% of their mangroves destroyed. We're not facing that issue. It's not necessarily a place where, issue where we have to replant mangroves. Our issues are more human stressors, hydrology, sedimentation, invasive species, et cetera, that are really affecting the health of this mangrove system. And so our approach is a little different from what you would expect in a typical restoration project, but it's still restoration and rehabilitation, because our efforts are to restore Davis Creek to what it used to be or what it could be if it didn't have these stresses, so that it can function properly, so it can maintain and be a healthy mangrove system a nursery for our fishes, for our important bonefish industry here in Andros, et cetera. So the project looks a little different than you would typically expect from a mangrove restoration project. All right, so a little history on the Davis Creek Mangrove Restoration Project. It started a long time ago, way before I came along. Wavell is in the room and he can tell you, he grew up in Love Hill in this area, and he can give you a lot of history on Davis Creek and what it used to be and what it used to look like. And Wavell is a keen avid birder, and he loved birds. And he noticed as a birder that there weren't as many birds in the area as it used to be. And that was related to, you know, the health of the mangroves, and there was a lot of more development, et cetera. So in 2015, a project was first established just looking at Davis Creek. And that was really, it wasn't like formalized or anything. And then in 2016, it was added to the Bahamas Pine Islands project. So the Bahamas Pine Island project, as I mentioned, is a larger project of the Bahamas Pine Islands, Grand Bahama, Abaco, and Andros. And New Providence too, right? Is New Providence in it? Yes, and New Providence. And they were looking for a site to demonstrate mangrove restoration, and they picked the Davis Creek site. Well, they picked another site first. They didn't cut it. So Davis Creek ended up being the site selected because it had potential for restoration, and there was already some work being done. And so it was chosen as the site for the Bahamas Pine Island project. After it was added to the project, there were some groups and some work being done from visiting schools, University of Wisconsin, River Falls, who actually came this year also to work on the project. And several consultants came and went through the project, but the work wasn't necessarily done to what it needed to be done for the project. And so there was a forestry consultant. And then last year, Just Consultants, myself, I was engaged to complete the work and kind of tie everything up and wrap it up for the Bahamas Pine Island projects. The picture that you're seeing outside on the screen, some of you can't see it, but you can. I actually took that picture from my front porch, and that's Davis Creek. It's an example of an area on the creek that's been cleared that used to be mangroves, and you could see when there's high tide, or when it rains, that water is coming back into my yard actually. And sometimes when there's a storm, like if this gets too bad, like on Friday, I'll literally have to evacuate my house. Like I can't stay where I am. And I've had to evacuate on several occasions. So the health of the mangroves and the reason why we need these mangroves are to make sure water stays where it's supposed to be and the mangroves absorb these storms and these floods that we may have, et cetera. And so, yes, like I said, in comes Just Consultants. So this is the work plan. I know it's a lot to see and read. You probably can't see it all for the project. So we started with project planning, and that was just doing a gap assessment to see what was needed, what was done in the project, what needed to be done to complete the work, and then developing a work plan from that. And then, so phase 2 was to do a site assessment and baseline analysis, and really to update that. You guys may get kicked out. So if you do, just use the link and we'll rejoin again. And that'll give us some time to set up because I think our HDMI cord is close. All right, and then we, the community-based restoration plan development, developing that, and then moving into implementation of the community-based plan. And we're in like stage 3, 4 right now. We have a plan, but we wanna make sure we get feedback before we finalize the plan and make sure we get input into that. We also had some training on the plan, which is in stage 4, and then we'll wrap up into completing the project. All right, so why is it important to have a community-based plan? So this picture in the corner there is one that I took with my drone of the community, of the area. And it's really important that the community gets involved and owns this project because the government is not gonna lead this project forever, but Davis Creek is always gonna have these same kind of issues. So we wanna make sure that the community actually gets engaged in managing and monitoring the Davis Creek area, that they're equipped, that their capacity is built so that they know what to look for, what things, are indicators that there's some unhealthy activities happening and then what to do to rectify it, et cetera. And that comes from frequent monitoring. And we want to make sure, even though the government is supporting it, that it's led by the community. And that calls for shared responsibility, having a sense of pride and ownership. And so that's why we really want to reach out to persons who live in the Davis Creek area, who work in the Davis Creek area, who are familiar with it and have that connection with the land in Davis Creek. So some of the activities that we've done at town hall meetings such as this, and it's very important. So our first town hall meeting we had was in February, where we kind of reintroduced the project. And it was similar to this. We had forestry come down. We also had DEPP was also here. Our administrator was here, supportful as always. And it was more people if the weather was better. And so we had a really good discussion. We heard a lot about what Davis Creek used to be and some of the indicators of what was there. And one of the things that we really did, what I really wanted to do was ranking of priority areas, get feedback from the persons who were there, the community persons, on what they felt were the higher priority areas for Davis Creek. And so when we did this priority ranking, we found that we had five areas, was either removing invasive species, replanting native species, mangrove species, reestablishing water flow, improving water quality, and controlling human stresses. So when we did this, we found that this was the results from those present, and this is how they ranked what needed to be controlled and how that should be controlled. And so the first was controlling human stresses. So most persons felt that human stresses was one of the leading issues when it comes to Davis Creek mangrove system. And that caused, we're talking about roads, development, clearing, all those sorts of stuff, that's the #1 impact to Davis Creek, which is actually very true. #2 came in at restoring the water flow. And the thing is, if you control some of the human stresses, water flow may actually restore itself, but actually restoring the water flow. And so that we're looking at cleaning out culverts, putting in better culverts, or restoring them, et cetera, or whatever the case may be. So making sure that water flow can get back to what it used to be, so that you can have those, that tidal change. And with that, you have different species moving to different parts of the mangrove system. And you could see in some areas where the water flow is cut off, the mangroves are dwarfed or they're not growing at all. And you could see where water used to flow, that the mangroves now have blocked those channels because the water had stopped flowing. And that used to be a pathway of the creek, as like one example. But because the water stopped flowing, the mangroves just grew up in the creek, and the creek was diverted. And so things like that would have to be done, like removing and restoring those water flows, so we could see like what was the natural flow of the creek. That will help. #3 was actually improving water quality, because we did find that there were some water quality issues in Davis Creek. You do have runoffs from like cesspits and laundromats, and we found high E. coli in some areas, which shouldn't be. E. coli only comes from human waste, right? And then we found other contaminants in the water. So improving water quality will also come by controlling human stresses. So we go back to #1. So a lot of things will actually, if we address #1, the human stressors, we will actually address a lot of the other things. And then removal of invasive species. So dominant invasive species, we'll talk about those. We've been removing, and we've been tackling the casuarinas and scavolas for years. Like, we just had a big exercise in May, and we drive down there now, we're like, they're back again. It's like, oh my goodness, it's a lot. And unfortunately, a lot of them were actually planted there as hedging. And so part of that is actually educating persons, no, you don't want to plant scavolas as hedging. Yeah, we know they're low maintenance and they look good, but they take over everything, right? And they start encroaching on the wetlands and the mangroves, and then you start having all these issues. So we've been working to remove them, and we keep tackling them. We got to dig them up by the roots, right? So that they don't come back. And so we plan on doing that some more. And so 5th on the list is why we're not really focusing that, is replanting native species, including mangroves. And so we want to make sure that we do that. we don't want to do something that we don't have to. So a lot of people start restoration probably, oh, we're just going to make a nursery and plant mangroves, but that's not necessarily the immediate or the priority need here in Davis Creek, which we determined. So that's not really our focus. That could come into play, and we could combine that with some other projects, having a nursery and replanting native species, not necessarily mangroves, but even like when we remove the scavolias along the hedging, we still want to put something back there. So we're looking at putting other native species there, some cocoa plum that we could probably eat, you know, or something like that. I know along Small Hope Bay, they have some coconuts, and they have other species along that are not invasive that we can plant instead of the scavolias, you know, since people want hedging and they want it to look nice for the guests, for the lodge, etc. So this is how we rank priorities. And this is very important, that this ranking didn't come from us. It didn't come from textbook. It came from the community. This is what they felt. This is what you felt were the priorities. And so this is what we're making the priorities for this project. So we talked about the scavollas, the Hawaiian sea grapes, very, very invasive. We have issues with them everywhere. I was just in Fiji last week, and they got scavollas like all over the place, you know, and it was like, and they have them in the mangroves and everything. Like, I'm like, oh, we have the same problem. And I saw the guys trying to dig them up and everything too. I'm like, yeah, it's a global phenomenon. It's all over the place. But Fiji is closer to Hawaii, so they have even more. And then we have the casuarina trees, of course, the Australian pines, that are just, the only word I can use is a hot mess, because like right outside my door, you can see, especially when they have a lot of sand erosion, and when they have storms, they're all laid out on the beach because, you know, they get toppled over, etc. And they just stay there, and their needles are everywhere, and they cause, you know, they're acidic, nothing else can grow under it, like nothing else can grow under it. And sometimes they make it into the mangroves, and they start affecting the pH, you know, because they're very acidic, the pH of the mangrove systems and all those sorts of things. So we want to make sure that we address them. Also, we have the cattails down. So Davis Creek is also connected to other creek systems. So the Small Hope Bay Creek, and then the pond that's there, and that's overrun with cattails now. I know a couple of years ago, maybe not, I don't know if anyone remember, Waylon will remember when they cleaned out that pond there by, you know, Small Hope Bay, and they put a nice lookout deck and to watch birds and everything else up. Now it's just cattails again. And so that's one of those things where you have to continuously like address those invasive species, because they take over everything, like everything. They literally suck the life out of whatever they come in contact with. And so we want to make sure that we address some of those. All right, we have less than a minute. So what I'm going to do right now, we're going to take a little break. Actually, this is a good time to have a little bit of a break. And I'm going to let you guys pop off. Please come back in the room, because we have some really cool stuff we want to finish talking about and discussing. And we're and get into right now. Okay, so we have less than a minute. We're going to get kicked out anyway, but I don't want it to abruptly kick us out. So we're going to take a little intermission break.